Doc Slab Audio on music production and audio engineering. Welcome to Doc Slab Audio and our Insights series. I do believe this is the 10th video in our Insights series, and on this video we want to talk about understanding complex software to better yourself as a producer and an engineer. So first and foremost, that we always have to keep in mind that we're doing music productions. We're not building a rocket ship. So no matter how complex the software is, that there's only so much you can actually produce and distribute. And here, as far as music is concerned, so really keep that in mind and don't get lost in that. Think you need to produce in MATLAB. I went through that until I realized that, like we talked in the last video about, issues and, 3 megabytes is compared to 720 megabytes. That where did all that stuff go, bro? So you really want to keep that in mind. The next thing is, whenever we're dealing with, there are tons of pieces of super complex pieces of software to help you get done what you want to do when working with music and music productions. Everything from in almost every area. And when you start really getting into it, that you get into some pieces of software like, I have RX. RX is a great example. So is Melodyne. Melodyne is another great example. Because when you get into the pieces of software, it's not so much about oh, well, that's great to do that. Sometimes it's overkill and redundant, but that doesn't mean that it's a good idea to understand that. Now, the next thing that I really want to make clear is that, like I said, that in software, if you get on the internet, you're going to find they're not going to give you the coding algorithms and the formulas that they used to build their software, or the formulas that they use when they're coding to perform things on audio. So you're never really going to know for sure exactly what is happening and how they went about accomplishing that. But you can analyze what you have and then what you have when you're done in your DAW, in other pieces of software, in things like MATLAB, to see how well things are done, which I have done quite a bit. But all these things, no matter what you're dealing with, no matter what aspect of it, RX is a great example, no matter what aspect of it you're dealing with, that all these things and all these tools in here are doing something, right? They're doing something to the audio. They're affecting the audio. And not only are these things great for editing, but they can also be great as effects and ways of affecting audio. And so as you get into them and you start digging around in them and you start really understanding what all these things are doing, you're going to become a much better producer and engineer, understanding the things you can't do and can do. And things like Melodyne are great for that. I have full Melodyne Studio, and this thing can do some amazing things with audio. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the key here is that, like, places on their site, explore the features of RX9. It's unbelievable once you get in here that there's a couple different things. All the features that it does, how it does that, what it's trying to accomplish, and the help in getting it done. It's like RX has, if I get into RX and I go, okay, I want to go into, launch help, on the internet, for RX. I mean, it is amazing all the information you get. So when you get in there and you start looking at all the things that it'll do, and you start, really studying about it and reading about it, that the concepts here are really going to affect you in a positive way as far as being a good and well-rounded engineer. Because as you really understand what it's trying to do, and you understand how it's trying to do that, and sometimes you got to do a little research. It tells you it's trying to da 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 da, and you're going, what? It's trying to what? You have to dig around a little bit. Go, okay, I got on the internet. What the heck does that mean? And dig around some, because sometimes it sounds really simple. And it's just like sometimes you get into like plugins or things that'll say, and then it's trying to whap bam something. It's trying to whap bam something. What does that mean? Does that make sense? Well, and a lot of it that they try to, state things in a way that doesn't sound stupid, but sometimes I've been shocked, but all the things that the thing does, that you get in there and start studying about it, the better of an audio engineer you're going to become, because you will almost assuredly, as you get into it and you start digging around about it, it's like RX, Melodyne, any of those, that as you get in and start digging around about what it's doing, how it's doing that, and you start studying about that, that it's going to make you a better engineer. Because, I learned that as I started, there was a learning curve. The first learning curve was using it. Then the next learning curve was being able to relate it to music production, and trying to figure out exactly what it was doing. And sometimes it's really simple. You get into something like RX, and it's pretty simple what it's trying to do, and it's pretty self-explanatory. That's not always the case. Sometimes you get in there and you start looking at interpolate. Interpolate. It's trying to interpolate. What does interpolate mean? What the heck is that? And extrapolate, interpolate, all these things of what it's doing. You're going to become a much more knowledgeable engineer. Does that make sense? And when it's dealing with these things, not only does it help make you a better engineer, but it's going to make you a more cautious engineer, so that when you start doing things and you go, well, this has been built to de-ess, de-crackle, de-clip, de-bleed, de-breath control, de-verb, interpolate, fix mouth clicks, fix, music rebalance, de-noise, spectral repair, voice de-noise. As you get into all these things, it's going to make you a much more, cautious engineer and producer, and no matter what area you're in, going, well, why do I want to mess with that, bro? How about I take certain steps to make sure that doesn't happen? That way I don't spend 4 hours in RX. That'd be a good idea, wouldn't you think? It's going to make you a better engineer. And when you run into things, you're able to deal with it in lots of different ways. And the better you understand it, the better you will deal with it. Does that make sense? Because there was a lot of times on my journey that I'd just be running into things and I'd be like, how am I going to fix that? There's no way to even deal with that. And the more I started studying, complex pieces of software and what they're trying to do, in those two areas make me a much more cautious engineer, and making me a better engineer and a more knowledgeable engineer when dealing with things, that in both areas I improved 1, 2, 3, 500%. Because by the time I really understood these things, that then they normally weren't that big of an issue. Like RX, how often do I pull this out and start messing with this? Not very often. Sometimes when I'm mixing or mastering, I'll mess with things, or if I run into an issue, I'm like, what is that, bro? Or I messed up when I was doing a capture, or, when I was processing. The processing came out really cool, but it had this other effect that I don't want on the audio that's mixed in with what I did to it, that's causing this, it's like, I've got caramel flavored popcorn and I love it, but it's got too much salt on it and there's nothing to do about it because it came in the recipe, and so I have to figure out how to deal with that. You know what I'm saying? Those kind of things can come up a lot whenever dealing with music productions and audio engineering. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, because even if you can't afford some of the more advanced software, studying about it, a lot of times you can go back to your simple tools in your DAW and deal with that stuff, either by being a more cautious engineer or realizing exactly what is happening and deal with it with the tools that you do have that are very affordable. Does that make sense? And when you can afford it, I do recommend. I mean, it's like I've got tons of pieces of software. I buy stuff. If you gave me $10 billion, I'd buy every piece of software on the planet. I just love it. Oh yeah, dude, that's so cool. You know, I mean, I just do. I buy stuff, new stuff all the time. If I can afford it, I just love it. But, you know, and not of it all that's needed, right? I mean, my go-to pieces of software, I've got my DAW, I've got iZotope Suite, I've got, a couple other plugins that I've gotten, and RX and Melodyne. And I use my MATLAB every now and then when I'm just like, what is going on there, bro? I can't see that nowhere. Or sound sculpting and sculpting synth sounds, or I have a really problem with something happening. But most of the time, those are my go-to pieces of software. So I just kind of want to throw that out there to get you to start looking at that, because after learning your stuff in your DAW and all the tools that you have and everything we've talked about, that really studying them and doing an in-depth study of complex software and what's happening there, what they're trying to do, how they're trying to do it, what does actually that mean, when they're trying to affect the audio in some certain way to get something done, is going to improve you by magnitudes as an engineer, because you are going to be a much more well-rounded, knowledgeable engineer whenever dealing with audio. So peace, hope, love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video on our new series, and I will see you in the next video.